the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport. Possibly the biggest rebuild I'm about to take on. After Alex crashed his Bugatti, he's nominated me to repair it.
Start getting your flights, mate.
And that challenge has become increasingly difficult as Bugatti refused to sell us part.
Most car companies stay quiet when a YouTuber starts tearing into one of their wrecks. Bugatti's own CEO did not. After one of 60 Chiron Pur Sport got crashed and blacklisted from ever buying factory parts again, Mat Rimac stepped in personally, citing real safety concerns.
But we just don't think it's safe, and that's why we can't support it.
And setting off a public standoff with rebuilder Mat Armstrong that ran for months. It only got stranger from there. A secret parts connection to an ordinary Audi, a workaround built from scrap metal, and an ending that walked back everything Bugatti had said it wouldn't do. Let's break down the crash, the standoff, the workaround, and the reversal, all in this video. How it all began. Let's rebuild the timeline properly, because the internet has mangled this story in about 6 different directions. The car in question is a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, the track-focused, corner-hungry version of Bugatti's 1600 horsepower flagship, and one of only 60 ever produced. Owned by Miami-based content creator Alex Gonzalez.
This is the $6 million Bugatti Pur Sport that was crashed by Alex.
The car was damaged during a stunt, hard enough that the front end took the brunt of it. Airbags deployed, carbon fiber cracked, headlights, the hood, the wings, and that unmistakable horseshoe grille were all destroyed outright. To understand why this car mattered so much, it helps to understand what a Pur Sport actually is. The standard Chiron already produces around 1600 horsepower from a quad turbocharged 16-cylinder engine.
The Pur Sport uses the same 8-litre quad-turbo W16 unit that you get in the normal Chiron. It puts out 1500 horsepower and 1600 Newton-meters of torque.
The Pur Sport variant sharpens all of that for corners, rather than top-speed runs. Shorter gearing, a stiffer suspension, more aggressive aerodynamics. And Bugatti built only 60 of them for the entire world. When new, a car like this cost well over $3 million. After the crash, it was worth a fraction of that, if anyone would even insure it. Here's the part that turns an expensive accident into a genuine crisis: the transmission. What first looked like a hairline fracture in the gearbox mounts turned out, on closer inspection,
the only thing that we've actually needed to repair is the gearbox bracket.
It's weldable.
But from now onwards, it's going to get a lot harder, especially without Bugatti's help.
To be enormous tears on both sides. This wasn't cosmetic damage anyone could paper over. This was structural. A Bugatti technician was flown in from Paris to inspect the car in person. Not a phone call, not a photo review, an actual flight across the Atlantic to look a wrecked hypercar in the eye. His verdict? Total loss. The car was given a salvage title and sent to a Copart auction, the same place you'd find a flooded Honda Civic, except this listing had a 7-figure hypercar sitting on it. Gonzalez bought it back. And this is where the story stops being a simple insurance write-off and starts being something else entirely, because Bugatti quoted approximately $1.7 million for a factory repair.
And what did it come to?
1.7
million. 1.7 million on parts. $1.7 million in parts is the official insurance quotation.
When that number was declined, the manufacturer didn't just decline to help further. It locked the car's identification number in its dealer network. No authorized Bugatti dealership, anywhere in the world, would sell parts for this specific car ever again. Think about that for a second. You cannot do this to a Ford. You cannot do this to a Toyota. But a hypercar built almost entirely from proprietary, low-volume hand-fitted components, exists in a strange legal gray zone, and Bugatti used it. That's when Mat Armstrong got involved. Armstrong has built a career out of rebuilding cars other people had already given up on. Smashed BMWs, wrecked Lamborghinis, cars insurers wrote off in an afternoon.
This was a Ferrari 296. That was until the previous owner crashed it. And then I bought it in hopes to rebuild it.
He flew out to inspect the Chiron before it disappeared into the auction system for good. And along the way, one of his own team members got rear-ended in a Ferrari on the way to the workshop. A 4-figure headache compared to the 7-figure one waiting for them. Armstrong took the job anyway. He knew the parts freeze meant he'd be building this car back almost entirely without Bugatti's help. There was also the small matter of money still owed on a car that no longer legally existed in Bugatti's eyes. Gonzalez had reportedly only owned the Chiron a couple of months before the crash, and was still paying a 5-figure sum every month on it, wrecked or not. That's the kind of financial pressure that turns a hobby project into something closer to a rescue mission. What Armstrong didn't know yet was that Bugatti's own chief executive was about to weigh in personally, and that the story was only getting started. Would a company that size really spend its energy publicly sparring with a YouTuber over one car? A CEO joins the fight. Most manufacturers stay quiet when a YouTuber starts tearing into one of their cars. Bugatti did not. Bugatti's chief executive, Mat Rimac, got personally and publicly involved. And once he did, this stopped being a story about one wrecked car and became a story about how a hypercar company thinks about the products it sells. It's worth knowing who Rimac actually is, because it explains why he engaged at all. He's not a career executive who inherited a French heritage brand. He built his own electric hypercar company, Rimac Automobili, from the ground up.
Two companies, it's Bugatti Rimac and Rimac Technology. And now I just appointed finally a CEO for Rimac Technology,
and ended up running Bugatti after it merged with his own operation. That background matters here. This is someone who still thinks like an engineer first, which is exactly the lens he brought to this dispute, for better and for worse. Before getting into what Rimac actually said, it's worth understanding the word he kept coming back to: monocoque. On a car like the Chiron, the monocoque isn't a frame you bolt panels onto. It is the structure, a single carbon fiber tub that the engine, suspension, and cabin all attach to directly. Damage that tub, and you are not fixing a dent. You are questioning whether the entire car can still protect the people inside it in another crash. That's the technical heart of everything Rimac said next. Rimac's argument, laid out across social media and later in a direct video response, rested on two pillars. The first was safety. He pointed out, correctly, that the crash hadn't just wrecked bodywork. It had shattered the gearbox housing and caused genuine structural damage to the monocoque, the carbon fiber tub that the entire car is built around. Cutting corners on that, he argued.
On top of that damage there is the damage to the carbon tub, which Bugatti quoted to replace the whole tub.
Wasn't a cosmetic risk. It was a real one, and it wouldn't just threaten Armstrong or Gonzalez. It would threaten whoever owned the car 10 or 20 years down the line, long after the YouTube views had come and gone. The second pillar was reputation. For years, stories about eye-watering Bugatti repair bills have circulated online like urban legend. 5-figure oil changes, service quotes that read like typos. Rimac pushed back hard on this, insisting that a lot of what circulates about Bugatti pricing online simply isn't accurate, get exaggerated every time the story gets retold. It's a fair frustration, honestly. Very few companies get to watch their own price list get reinvented by strangers every few months. and even fewer get to publicly correct the record without sounding defensive. And to be fair to him, he didn't just shut the door and walk away. Rimac said Armstrong was welcome to bring the car to Bugatti's own facility in Molsheim, France, for a proper evaluation. He said he respected what Armstrong does. He even said, more than once, that he'd genuinely like to see the project succeed as a fellow enthusiast. This wasn't a company pretending a YouTuber didn't exist. This was a chief executive who clearly felt cornered into defending a decision he believed was correct.
That challenge has become increasingly difficult as Bugatti refused to sell us parts.
But we just don't think it's safe, and that's why we can't support it.
In front of an audience that had already made up its mind about who the villain was. But here's the tension that kept this story alive for months. Rimac was asking the world to trust Bugatti's judgment on a car it had already refused to help fix. Bugatti wanted control over how and whether this car came back to life, without offering the parts or labor to make that happen on any terms but its own. This wasn't just a public statement either. By some accounts, Rimac reached out to Armstrong directly, messaging him after Armstrong floated the idea of three-dimensional printing components Bugatti wouldn't sell. That's not the behavior of a company that's decided to ignore a problem. That's the behavior of a chief executive who is watching his replies section very, very closely, and who clearly saw this story going somewhere he didn't want it to go. So when Armstrong went looking for an alternative path, and found one hiding in plain sight, it didn't just solve a parts problem. It undercut the entire premise Rimac had built his defense on. How do you argue that only Bugatti can safely handle these repairs, when half the car's supporting cast came from a showroom down the street? The Audi that exposed Bugatti's secret. Here's where this story turns from a corporate standoff into something genuinely interesting. Because the wall Bugatti built around this car turned out to have gaps nobody expected, and Armstrong found the first one in an unglamorous Audi. The Chiron's airbags, along with a handful of other supporting components, share part numbers with those used in the Audi A3.
Now it's the same explosive, it's the same actual airbag inside. I was going to buy another one just to show you that it was the exact airbag and split it apart.
A car that costs roughly 1% of what a Chiron does. Why? Because Bugatti sits inside the Volkswagen Group, alongside Audi, Porsche, and half a dozen other brands that quietly share engineering, tooling, and yes, parts bins, across price points that would otherwise seem worlds apart. It's not a scandal. It's how large automotive groups keep costs down. But it is deeply inconvenient for a narrative built around "only we can safely handle this." Rimac's response to this was measured and worth taking seriously rather than dismissing outright. Don't automatically mean shared safety margins in every application. He pointed to a real engineering detail from Bugatti's own testing. During cold weather trials of a different model at temperatures around -20 degrees Celsius, engineers discovered that dashboard leather could stiffen enough to interfere with airbag deployment, forcing Bugatti to adjust how that leather was treated during production. His point was that context and calibration matter, that a part number match on paper doesn't guarantee identical performance once you factor in everything around it. That's a fair technical point. It's also, notably, a much narrower and more defensible claim than "nobody outside Bugatti can safely touch this car," which was closer to the message that had been circulating publicly before the Audi details surfaced. There's a second crack worth mentioning too, and it's a strange one. Armstrong had floated the idea of three-dimensional printing certain components Bugatti wouldn't sell, and Rimac firmly pushed back, insisting the technology simply isn't precise enough to reproduce something as specialized as a Chiron headlight. Fair enough. Except Bugatti itself uses three-dimensional printed parts, so the honest position wasn't, "We never do this." It was, "We do this, but only when we control every variable." That's a more reasonable stance than the internet gave Bugatti credit for, but it's also a more complicated one than, "Trust us, it's impossible." And complicated arguments don't survive a viral video nearly as well as simple ones do. Then there was the transmission split. Bugatti's position, repeated more than once, was that separating the Chiron's modular front and rear sections required specialized equipment available at only a couple of facilities on the entire planet.
They have to split the car in half. You can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
Armstrong and his father built a workaround instead. A standard two-post lift combined with a rolling base salvaged from a workshop garbage can and whatever scrap materials they had lying around. It worked. The sections came apart. It's a genuinely funny image. A piece of trash propping up one of the rarest cars ever built. But it's also the moment the only Bugatti facilities can do this argument stopped holding up in practice, whatever the theoretical safety case behind it. Somewhere, a workshop garbage can earned its place in Bugatti history, and nobody at the factory in Molsheim is putting that on a plaque. And once that crack appeared, Armstrong didn't slow down. He sped up. The rebuild that shouldn't have worked. If the last section was about finding the cracks, this one is about what Armstrong actually built through them. And it's the part of this story that turns a legal dispute into something closer to a masterclass in improvisation. The centerpiece was the gearbox mount. This is a component deliberately engineered to break in a crash, redirecting impact forces away from the rest of the car's structure, meaning even a relatively minor accident can destroy it completely, by design. That's not a flaw. It's the whole point of the part. A sacrificial piece built to fail, so the more expensive structure around it survives. A factory replacement was, unsurprisingly, extraordinarily expensive and completely unavailable, given the parts freeze. So a specialist took a torch to it instead, TIG welding the broken mount back together. A repair many people in the automotive world considered flatly impossible on a part whose entire purpose is to fail on command, since welding it changes the very properties that made it break the way it was designed to. It held anyway. From there, the improvisation kept stacking up. A pinched coolant overflow line, which would normally need an official replacement, got fixed with a length of ordinary rigid brake hose. Custom radiators were fabricated from scratch to replace ones destroyed in the crash. The exhaust system went to a specialist shop called Valvetronic, who built a bespoke unit rather than sourcing an official one that simply wasn't for sale. Somewhere in the middle of all this, Armstrong pointed out, almost as a throwaway line, but a genuinely funny one, that the accelerator pedal on a car capable of over 300 miles an hour is just molded plastic, not the billet aluminum you'd expect for a machine at this price point. But it quietly undercuts the mystique a company spends millions building around a product like this. For the interior, the team rebuilt what they could and sourced what they couldn't, airbags included, from that same Audi parts bin that had already caused Bugatti so much trouble to explain away. Meanwhile, the plan for a permanent replacement gearbox mount involved three-dimensional scanning the damaged part, converting it into a digital model, and having a machine shop cut a new one on a CNC mill, essentially reverse engineering a component Bugatti wouldn't sell, using the broken one as a blueprint. Think about the audacity of that for a moment. A billion-dollar manufacturer says a part is too specialized to source anywhere else, and the answer is to scan it, redraw it, and machine a new one from scratch in a normal workshop. None of this was factory standard, and Armstrong never claimed it was. He was upfront that this rebuild wouldn't match Bugatti's tolerances, because the alternative was letting a 1 of 60 car rot in a warehouse over a pricing dispute. And then, against genuinely long odds, it worked. Coolant, fuel, intercooler, and the engine control systems all came back together. The front and rear sections were reunited, and the Chiron fired up. The car had reportedly been driven at one point without coolant in the system, which is about as forgiving on an engine as it sounds, and sharp-eyed viewers spotted a hairline crack in later footage that Armstrong had to go back and address. None of it stopped the car from running. The moment the engine actually caught was, by every account, the emotional high point of the entire project. Months of scanning, welding, scrap metal, and Audi parts boiling down to a single 16-cylinder engine note in a Miami workshop. The Chiron that a Bugatti technician had personally declared dead was, once again, a functioning hypercar, built back together with a rebuilt interior, custom radiators, a bespoke exhaust, and parts from at least one manufacturer that would probably rather not be mentioned in the same sentence as Bugatti. That alone would have made a satisfying ending. But the story had one more turn left in it, and it's the turn that makes this whole saga worth remembering. The moment Bugatti changed its mind. Here's the part of this story that nobody, including Armstrong, fully expected. Bugatti didn't dig in. It shifted. According to multiple reports on the project, Rimac eventually said he would support the rebuild after all, and Bugatti went on to lift the parts blacklist on the car and reduce its original repair estimate. After months of a locked identification number and a company publicly defending its refusal to help, the wall came down, at least partially. Not fully. Bugatti never handed over a factory-quality repair or an official stamp of approval, but enough that a car once frozen out of its own dealer network could buy parts again, at prices closer to earth than the original $1.7 million figure. Why? The honest answer is that we don't know for certain, and it's worth resisting the urge to package this into a tidy corporate villain arc, because the real story is messier than that. Gonzalez had reportedly floated the idea of manufacturing replacement components through three-dimensional printing if Bugatti wouldn't budge. Less a viable engineering plan, maybe, than a pressure tactic, but either way, it seems to have moved the conversation forward. This pressure was also building in public, with millions of views stacking up on every new development. One Armstrong upload alone, walking through the Audi airbag connection.
Whether these airbags are actually from an Audi A3. And also blown out the steering wheel airbag cover. So my job was to cross-reference the actual airbags to find out what cars they're actually from.
Reportedly pulled in nearly 7 million views in days. Bugatti wasn't managing a quiet dispute anymore. It was managing a story the whole internet had opinions about. There's also a wrinkle worth sitting with. On the Cars and Money podcast, hosted by Rob Moore and Carl Hartley, Armstrong later gave his own read on the situation, and it was more complicated than a simple corporate reversal. His impression was that Rimac had at one point indicated a repair could be worked out, but that someone else inside the organization appeared to have overruled that openness, and the public tone shifted afterward in a way Armstrong found genuinely strange. He compared the back and forth with Rimac to a friendly rivalry between two well-known athletes. Plenty of respect between them, even while the internet turned it into a feud that neither was actually fighting. Rimac, to his credit, had never been purely combative, even at the height of the standoff. He'd said more than once that he respected Armstrong's work and would genuinely like to see the project succeed as a fellow enthusiast. Looked at in hindsight, that reads less like courtesy and more like an early hint of where this was always headed. That nuance matters. This wasn't a clean case of a chief executive caught in a lie. It was a company whose internal position seemed to shift depending on who inside it was speaking, and whose public explanation didn't always match what was happening on the ground with shared parts and available equipment. Viewers who followed the saga split roughly down the middle. Some sided with Armstrong, arguing a company shouldn't control repairs it refuses to perform itself, while others sided with Bugatti, pointing out that a YouTuber tinkering with a hypercar's structure is exactly the kind of brand risk a manufacturer is entitled to worry about. Both sides had a point, usually the sign of a genuinely interesting story rather than a simple one. What we can say for certain is this: a car declared dead by Bugatti's own inspector got rebuilt using Audi components, scrap metal, a torch, and stubbornness. And the same company that once refused to sell it a single headlight ended up softening its position once the world was watching. So what actually changed Bugatti's mind? The safety case, the shared Audi parts, or just the sheer weight of public attention? Probably all three. What's certain is this: a car declared dead by Bugatti's own inspector came back using scrap metal, an Audi parts bin, and plain stubbornness. And the same company that blacklisted it eventually softened its stance once the world was watching. That leaves one real question worth sitting with. When you buy a seven-figure hypercar, how much of it is actually yours? And how much still belongs to the badge on the hood? Tell us where you land in the comments, and subscribe. This one isn't over yet.